So there's a long-standing discussion that's gone on about the differences between traditional Advaita Vedanta, the traditional mystical school of Hinduism, which talks about the route to the recognition of oneness, or non-duality, I should say, to be more precise, and so-called neo-Advaita. And I want to speak about the differences between the two, or really, I think three would be more accurate, because I think neo-Advaita could itself be split into two different things which are quite different from each other. So the basic difference is that traditional Advaita is more, I would say, systematic. There are more set requirements and steps for doing things. For example, if you're a seeker, you're told to have a long list of requirements before you approach a master for supreme spiritual guidance. A seeker is supposed to have what they call the six treasures, which include patience and faith and control of the senses. They're supposed to have a dispassionate disgust with the pleasures of the world. They're supposed to have the ability to discern real from unreal, plus a powerful longing for the truth, right? So all kinds of requirements, right? And then the other big aspect of it is that in traditional Advaita Vedanta, there is an enormous emphasis placed on Shruti, or scripture. And scripture is the primary way of knowing. And it's by contemplating and understanding the words of the scripture that one comes to destroy ignorance. So, for example, they have what are called the Mahavakyas, which are, the great sayings from the Upanishads, which include sayings like Tattvamasi, thou art that, which is referring to the identity of your own innermost essence with the innermost essence of the world. They're the same. But what does that actually mean? Right? So let's keep that aside for a second, right? And then let's look at so-called neo-Advaita. So neo-Advaita, I would say, split into two different sections, or could be viewed two different ways, right? First way is there's a bunch of people who basically claim that you are that already. There's nothing to be done. There's nothing that can be done. That you are the self, and that effort is both impossible and unnecessary. So this sort of neo-Advaita is criticized, and justly criticized, because the reality is it is only one side of the coin. While it is true that the self is already the case, and that in some profound sense effort is unnecessary, it's also the case that effort is necessary to get to that understanding. Otherwise, what you're left with is not the actual truth, but a shell of it, a superficial understanding of it. This idea that you're already that. It becomes just this concept, or this idea that is not actually understood. In order to understand it, it requires effort. It requires effort to purify the mind and look inward. So that kind of neo-Advaita is criticized for good reason. The other kind of neo-Advaita, I would say, is a much more positive version of it. And it is the version of neo-Advaita that comes with a sage like Ramana Maharishi, who basically simplified, distilled, and purified the teachings of traditional Advaita Vedanta radically, and brought out a different facet of them. So the emphasis in the original traditional Advaita tradition is on understanding the meaning of the words of the great scriptures, right? So you really try to understand the words through profoundly deep analysis. And Ramana Maharishi, and I would call other neo-Advaitins of his stripe, I would count myself among them, although obviously I'm just propounding ultimately what he said, is focusing on examining your own experience, right? Going within, turning within, looking within at the eye, discerning what it really is. Now, the real reality is that the traditional Advaita method and the method of Maharishi are really ultimately the same. They are two sides of the same coin, because in order to understand the words of the scripture, in order to understand sayings like Tattvamasi, you have to examine to what they refer. You have to look inward at the experience to which, when you see a saying like "Thou art that," what does the "thou" refer to? What does the "that" refer to? You have to look inward to understand. So it is not simply a kind of mechanical, logical analysis. It is a phenomenological contemplation if you actually want to understand the words. And so that is self-inquiry. You will have to look inward. In order to understand the words, you will have to have sufficient concentration, meaning a quiet mind, to look inward. And Maharishi recommends the same thing. The same is true, right, of his approach, which is, in order to do self-inquiry, you have to have a relatively quiet mind. And then you are trying to distinguish what the meaning of this concept called the I is. So neo-Advaita is really just another way of looking at the traditional teachings by bringing up the fact that it's not necessarily about specific words. It is about a process of inner investigation. And that process has to be continued until there's a clarity that goes beyond any set of dualistic ideas. Ultimately, what you are cannot be put in terms of dualistic ideas. All the words are merely indirect references to them. And that's true even in traditional Advaita Vedanta. So the traditional and the neo-Advaita, someone like Ramana Maharishi, are really just rephrasings. People have gotten lost in believing that it's about some kind of purely conceptual understanding. No, there's an experiential aspect to understanding the words of the scriptures. And as Ramana Maharishi once put it, there'll come a point when as a seeker you'll have to forget all that you've learned and look within if you want the truth.